Okay, so we are on. So welcome again to this study over the next few weeks of God and the different. God is there understood. God is understood in other cultures, and so we will begin that study. This will be an introduction tonight, and so as we start, it would be helpful for me to know, to hear from you about the kinds of things you're hoping to gain from our time together over the next few weeks. If you're willing to share. If you're not, that's okay too. But yeah,
I'll ask.
please.
Okay. One of the things you always hear people say as soon as you start talking about other religions is, well, all religions lead to God, you know.
Right.
And so, and then you go, well, so I mean, it's terms of an frequently asked question as soon as you start talking about world religions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we will deal with at least part of that tonight. So that's good that you brought that up. Anybody else?
Well, I know I have neighbors that live across the street who are from India.
Mm.
And so I'd be really interested to learn what their religion is and what they believe. I have generally no idea.
Right, right. Good, good. And as it turns out, that will be the religion that we deal with next week, right off the bat. So good. Yeah.
So this will be topical then?
Right, right. And I'm not going to get these all in order because I don't have my slides open yet, but you'll see it on the slides, and so I'll go through that list here in just a minute, and
Great.
we'll do it by topic. Anybody else want to share? Okay. And if you see somebody with the admit me and I miss it, let me know. Okay, so welcome to those of you that are just joining. We're just getting started, and so I think to honor our hour together, I have a few things to share, and then we can have a discussion about those. And to do that, I would like to share my screen, so I'm going to do that now. And here we go. So we are going to talk about God in other cultures, and this is the first week. If you have a Bible and it's different than the NIV, I'd invite you to take that out. But the basis for what I would like us to do together in our time over the next few weeks is to consider all of these different understandings or beliefs about God from this point of view, which is 1 Peter 3:15, and I need to move you all to a different side here so I can read the scripture. And it reads in the NIV like this: "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect." And Paul goes on to talk a little bit more about that. But what I want you to take away from this are two main parts. Be prepared to give an answer. In some versions, I think it reads as defense. I'm not sure which version you might have, but I want you to hear that word in a different way than us Americans tend to hear it. We tend to say, I'm going to win this argument, and we're in a court of law, and I'm on the defensive, those kinds of attitudes, when the scripture really is asking us to be more concerned, to be ready to say, this is what I believe. This is how I see it. This is my experience with Jesus. And it's a much more personal sort of thing. It's not a win the argument sort of thing, because we have a hope, and that resides in us, and we need to be ready to explain that, ready to put it within the context of what other people know, experience, don't know, don't experience. And I think the key in that verse is with gentleness and respect, because everybody is on a journey to Jesus. Some are running in the opposite direction, but God has made the way open for all of us. So how do we make that path to Jesus more approachable, more walkable for folks? And that's what I'd like you to keep in mind. So we'll start with that verse just about every time we meet together. So I want to make some general statements for you about our time together and how we're going to approach that. First of all, people out there have a smorgasbord religion about God these days. They take a little of this and they take a little of that to kind of create their own meal, their own religious meal, if you will. And that's especially true in the Northwest. In 1980 something, I forgot to look up the date, a researcher came up with the term nuns because people in the Northwest considered themselves not particularly a part of any religious group. And so it became known as the zone of the nuns, or the nun zone. And when I say nuns, I mean N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S. Okay. And so that really speaks to our cultural heritage. People from all over the globe settled into the Northwest. They came from Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe. They came from Asia. They came from the Midwest. They were people who were born here and were on the East Coast. They came from the Native American peoples. And so we have this kind of conglomeration historically. So when a lot of people talk to you, they will tend to say this statement: I'm spiritual, but not religious. What does that mean? That means that they're interested in spiritual things. They have some ideas. They may do things that are spiritually minded, anything from crystals to attending to church, the kind of this wide gamut. We have some pretty active Wiccan groups in the Northwest. And so there's some Druids and all kinds of stuff. So that's important for you to realize that they've not shut the door to you just because they make that statement, that they're spiritual but not religious. When they're not religious, that tends to mean that they're a little skeptical or a little cynical about organized religion, i.e. the church. Okay, so when they're not religious, they're a little nervous about the organized church. Okay, next, another general statement. They also tend to use the word religion to mean a denomination of religion, and most likely a denomination of Christianity. So you'll hear people say things like, well, I'm Catholic, when they are Christian, or they'll say I'm Methodist, or I'm something other than that. All those groups are Christian. And some really conservative fundamentalist groups would say, well, no, they're not. And that's a different argument. Okay. But generally speaking, if you have a casual to moderate conversation with folks and they say, well, my religion is Methodist, that's what they mean. That they're talking about Christianity, but they're talking about their background, where they came from, what their parents were, what their spouse is, that sort of thing. Okay. Next general statement is, as I approach this, and I hope you will approach this, I'm bringing things to the table for you, not as rocks to throw at other people or points that you can win with someone, but so that you can have a general understanding about religion so you can listen better. I remember the very first time I talked to someone who was not Christian. They had all these ideas, and I was just like, I kind of lost my ability to witness because I had no clue what they were talking about. And so this is to help you not be so shocked or befuddled or confused or that sort of thing, that you've heard some of it before and it's not quite as disturbing or unsettling to you. The other part of what I hope you will do is that you have general understandings of these different religious ideas so you can ask better questions of the people that you talk to. I think that probably goes without saying. And lastly, I want you to have some insights into how people may think or feel about spirituality. Maybe. I'm not saying everybody does, but it'll give you some little hints, some little insights into where they're coming from and how they see it, and help you with those places to open the door to Jesus better for you at the right time. Okay, so before I go on to the next thing, does anybody want to ask a question about that? Any comments? I'm going to unshare this for just a moment so I can see you all, see if there's any questions.
I have I guess an observation or just something to say.
Sure.
I hear a lot from maybe the older millennials and the group just next to them, whatever that group is. Well, I don't believe in organized religion.
Right.
And it kind of irritates me because you can't have any group of people that have one function or one goal in mind if it's not organized.
Sure.
To me, it's just a cop-out.
Sure.
So,
Well, and what they're probably telling you from my experience is they've seen some pretty bizarre stuff. They've experienced some stuff from church, and they don't want any part of that, whatever that was. And so
okay.
they're not necessarily turned off to Jesus or the church, but the institution of church with its elected officers and its budgets and its stuff has been a bad experience, or at least a question mark, or they've heard stuff. And so I think that really becomes an open door to say, tell me more. Why does that bother you? What's been your experience? Just to find out where they've been. And some of the stories will be ones that you'll probably want to apologize for, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's
Thank you.
Single engaged. We're not very organized
Yeah.
at all.
Okay, good.
That's only in your office, Pastor.
All right. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Okay, then I want to move into this. This again is the overview of religions in general. And so we're going to, that's right. No, that's not going to work, is it? I may not be able to do that again without being kind of crazy. So what I want you to understand is that in the realm of religion and understanding God, the concepts of God fall into some really basic categories, some basic understandings. So on one side of this, we have what are called the animistic or pantheistic religions. And basically what that means is that objects and places and creatures and things all possess some sort of distinct spiritual essence. Example, if you go to Japan, Mount Fuji, the huge mountain there, is considered a spiritual place because it has a spiritual essence to it. And that is more than, oh, isn't this pretty? It's much deeper than that. And there's a lot of history and understanding that goes with that. That's one example. Kind of connected to that is the understanding that we call polytheism, which is that there's a belief in many gods in many places. So, for example, there is in Egyptian ancient Egyptian religion, there's the sun god and the moon god and the god of the winged creatures. And so there's a god for everything. In some estimations, in some religions, there can be as many as, and we'll talk about this when we get to it, but 330 million gods. Pick one, okay? Pick one. And so we say, oh, well, that's all ancient stuff. Not so much. If you run into someone, have a conversation with someone who's grown up in the more rural areas of Africa, that's very prevalent. If you talk to someone who's very much, their family is very much from the very deep South in New Orleans or Haiti or the Dominican Republic, and you hear them talk about voodoo, that's many gods. There's a pantheon of many gods. Okay, yeah.
Well, I just got an observation, but my family loves Disney.
Great.
And it seems like almost every single movie is bringing in that cultural
Right.
aspect of their understanding
Right.
of God.
Right.
To which case, kids that don't talk about this with their folks, they grow up and then they say, well, what do I want?
Yeah, exactly. And so the popular culture does us two things. It does us a service because it opens the door for discussion, because you can say, what do you think about the Lion King Circle of Life? Or you can say, if it doesn't get talked about, it sort of muddies the picture. So it's a both and in my mind. So I think we're good to pay attention to what the culture teaches us. Yeah, good. And not that the culture teaches us truth all the time. Right. So when we talk about animism, pantheism, here are some examples of those religions. Shinto, which is the natural religion in Japan. Native American religions all have this kind of sense of that aspect of a spiritual essence inhabiting nature. And then all of the indigenous religions of Africa and South America fit into that as well. I could make a longer list. The Druids of northwestern Europe believe in a kind of a pantheistic, animistic sense of things. The Wiccan religion does the same in that. There are quite a few of those folks in the States. For polytheism, here are some examples I've already mentioned. Ancient Egypt. If you've been in a classical education realm, you've probably learned all the Roman and Greek gods, Zeus and Mercury, and the lady with the snakes in her head. I forgot her name. Medusa. There you go. Yeah. And so those are examples of polytheism. Some more concepts of God that move beyond this, and we'll spend most of our time exploring these two. One is what is considered a Western concept of God, and that is to say God is a person. God is knowable to some degree by people. And I have person in quote marks because we need to be careful not to equate that with human. But God has personality. God has essence. God has self-awareness. All those concepts that go with that. This understanding of God also says that God knows and interacts with people on a personal level. It's in some way, some shape, some form. And that's huge. How that gets worked out, we'll see how that is put forward in each of the religions. But I'm sure you can see right there where Christianity fits into that. The other side of that is harder for us to grasp if we've grown up in Christian circles, or that's our mindset or Western mindset. And it's referred to as the Eastern understanding. And that is to say that God is non-personal. By that I mean God is not a person, does not have personality, does not have a personal essence, does not have personal awareness. And as soon as I say that and you let that sit with you for a moment, it's like, and exactly how does that work? You say, what? Well, let me add a little more to it, to the non-person. If you've watched the Star Wars movies and you've heard the Force be with you, that's where Lucas got the idea for the Force. It's from the Eastern religions, which see God, quote unquote, as a life force. No beginning, no end. Well, some of their philosophies do have something to say about that, but just generally speaking. But it's a force, and it doesn't know that you're there. You're just a part of it. And if you're out of sync with the life force, that's why your life is so messed up. We want you to know. Okay. Doesn't know people, but people do experience the life force. I want to move this over here just a little bit for the folks here in the room. And so God in the Eastern religions doesn't conceive of God as knowing us or caring about us, because it's beyond the capacity, that's beyond the concept of God to do that. You can experience the God of those religions, but it can't experience you. And these are general statements. Somebody who is a Buddhist or a Shintoist would say, I want to beg to differ with you on this point, but generally speaking, that's the concept. So you can see that when somebody says, well, I believe in God, that can cover a lot. That can mean just about anything. And it's our opportunity to ask them, so what does that mean to you? How do you see that? How have you experienced that? What's your belief? And hear what they have to say. Chances are, because we have a smorgasbord idea about that, they'll take some of the ideas about Western God and fold in some of the Eastern God, and we'll talk about that when we get into some of the specific religions. So again, I'll try to scroll through all of you. If I don't see you, just start talking and you'll pop up. Anybody want to ask any questions of clarification about that?
Yeah, Patty, could you maybe talk about the difference between pantheism and panentheism?
Say the two words got garbled in my hearing.
Pantheism,
Right.
and then I've heard also panentheism.
I think if I understand those two terms correctly, pantheism is the older word, and the other say the word again.
Panentheism.
Panentheism is a more of a newer concept, trying to nuance the understanding that some of it is in inanimate objects and some of it's in animate things like animals and trees and flowers and life forces, that sort of thing. That's my understanding. I'm not sure I'm entirely correct on that.
Thank you.
Do you have a
That's kind of what I thought. I mean,
yeah.
The Latin root "an" means in, so God in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything.
There's a whole branch of the study of religion that tries to, put, our Western mind likes to put everything in these little boxes. And so I think that panentheism is an attempt to acknowledge that for some people, it's God, but it's God indwelling something.
Okay.
And the pantheism is a broader term. God is out there in the stuff. There's God out there, part of the world. Yeah. Good.
Thank
Anybody else? I really like this big clock on the wall so I don't go over time.
Is after a really long leadership meeting.
Oh, that
Clock
appeared on the
appears
wall.
shortly
Gotcha.
after that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments you want to make? Okay, well, moving right along then. I just thought for sure we'd have more of that. Let me give you some examples of those different religions. Western religions are Judaism, and these are the ones that we're going to cover together in the next few weeks. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all conceive as God as personal, person, essence, knowable to some degree, knows us for sure. And so those three are the largest of the Western religions. There's some other smaller ones we could throw in there. I love to say this word because people go, oh, wow, really? We're going to talk about Zorro? Zoroastrianism is another one of those religions that fits into the Western concept. But it comes out of ancient Persia and inhabits that Turkey, Iran, Iraq area, Pakistan, some of that. The other side of that is Eastern religions, which are the biggies, are Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, and I have the two different spellings there of it. You may see it one way and you may see it another way. And so I'm going to stop right here and say, if you count on your fingers, how many weeks have I covered there?
7.
I've got 8 there, including today. So here's my question for you. Are you interested in a subcategory of Christianity that says this is how all the denominations came into existence? Or would you rather do something at the end that says this is how we could use this information in a fuller way? I plan to do that at the end of every session anyway, but so if you have any preferences, now's a good time to let me know. Or if you want to think about it, I can ask again next week.
Well, your second option sounds most practical to me.
Mhm.
If you did the subcategories of Christianity, would we finally discover which one Jesus affiliates with? He's
We-
Baptist.
yeah.
Oh, good. That's what I
Come
thought.
on.
He was baptized by John the Baptist, so there you go, right? I think the advantage to doing the denominations is that more than likely you're going to talk to somebody who's come out of one of those backgrounds, and they may have some angst or hiccups or weird ideas or frustrations or questions, and it might give you a little better sense of where they're coming from. So that's why I'm offering that, because we can do the how do we use this at the end of each session that we have together. But I'm willing to do whatever makes the most sense to you all. And if you want to think about it, that's good too.
Patty, is Mormonism going to be discussed at all?
Is what?
Mormonism?
Mormonism comes under the denominational things. So I have the main categories, and then there's one category that's called Religions Made in America that falls under that. So we have Jehovah's Witness, we have Mormons, we have those are the two biggies I think that I have.
Yeah.
On this.
How about Christian Scientist?
Christian Scientist, thank you. That's the other one. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Where do you put Catholicism? Because I don't look at that as a Christianity, because they worship Mary,
Oh, okay.
you know, and they say they're married to Christ, and then they tell you, well, nobody knows Christ, and
Mhm, mhm.
you know, I just, you know, so I just wonder where that fits in.
That fits into Catholicism. In actuality, is Christian, but there are
Okay.
big question marks about, in a lot of circles, about how that can be, and so we will talk about that and why
Okay.
we'll raise the flag about, yeah, but what about they say, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Patty, I have a question too. I have a sister-in-law who goes to a metaphysical church. And we've talked about God in the past, and she tells me what they do is they just take all the best out of all the different religions and combine them together.
Mhm.
So I don't know where that fits into all of this.
That's kind of the actual living example of smorgasbord. There's a group whose their headquarters are in Haifa, Israel, and they are one of those groups that say, you know, Christianity has something, Judaism has something, Islam has something, Hindu has something, and so in the United States, they kind of come under that metaphysical umbrella, and it's a way to make room at the table for everybody to have their own belief and still not have to make a decision about certain things, because it's a live and let live kind of thing. So I would say probably that fits under the other denominations or other religions piece of that. Like I said, there's a whole list of those. One textbook I kind of like refers to them as the religion of the dissenters, except that Baptists were called dissenters in the 1600s, so I have a little trouble with the category there. These are all really good questions.
Yeah.
So the Church of the Metaphysical, I'm not sure if that's how they refer to themselves or if they just say metaphysicists, which is kind of a mouthful too. Some of those folks are purely philosophical. You know, how do you live your life? And some of them are probably even agnostic. They don't know if there is a God, but this seems like the best way to live life.
Yeah, I think his sister's probably more philosophical than anything else.
Yeah.
She says that she believes in God, and she says she prays to God all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we went one conversation on our way back from Silverwood, and I thought, boy, there's something really wrong with this whole conversation. And so I finally asked her, I said, well, do you believe in Jesus? And she got very, very, very quiet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where the division was.
Exactly. And many of those churches, quote, in quote marks, churches, are there because people really stumble over Jesus being God. And so we have a group that are called the Universalists, and we have a group that are called the Unitarians, and we have a group called the Universalist Unitarians. Put those two things together. So yeah, we'll touch on each one of these, and I'll do as much as I can in a short period to kind of give you the high points, so you have some sense of where they're coming from. And maybe, so how do you engage that person in a meaningful conversation? And with the understanding that it's not always a one-off kind of thing where you ask the question, you have the conversation, and ta-da, out pops a fully baked cake. And sometimes those conversations take weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months. And we have to be okay with that. God is at work.
Well, and even challenge just our understanding. Even if I say I'm Baptist, someone else says I'm Baptist too, we might have a different understanding of what it means to be Baptist.
Exactly.
But I'm right.
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to move along then to the next thing. And I want to talk to you about religious experience, because that comes up as people begin to open up to you and want to explore God. Okay, so I have two different diagrams that represent the basic division between God as person, God as personal, and God as not person, not personal. So the first one is, if you want to use this circle, we'll say that this circle represents at least the world and maybe the universe, what we can experience of life in the physical, okay? And this circle represents us, an individual, and we all are in the world. There's no way out of that at this juncture until we die. And so we're in the world, we're in the universe, we have these kinds of physical experiences, and we're all trying to make sense of those. And so in the non-person understanding of God, Eastern / animism, pantheism, even polytheism, we understand that God, something in the outside world intersects us. Something grabs our attention. Something happens to us and we're going, whoa, what was that? Maybe it's, you've seen the TV shows about the paranormal, and the spirits making clanky noises in the basement kind of thing. And so people go, oh, what is that? What is that? And so in that experience, this, sorry, I need to back up. This little piece right here where the outside world intersects the person, that's the religious experience for some people. And they try to find ways to describe that and to explain it and to interact with it and to make it happen again, okay? So it's all self-contained. It's something within the world, within the universe, that's in the universe. That's different than the other side of that, which says, here's the universe, here's the world, here's us in the world, and there's something outside of all of that that intersects both the universe and us. And that little experience, that little intersection, or that big intersection, is God, is the religious experience. So you can see that we're talking about, where does this experience come from? Is it just within the universe, or is it something that someone that stands completely outside the universe? In Christianity, we would call that God the Father or God the Creator, who stands outside of time, outside of the universe. And anybody who's done a little bit of theology would have caught my mistake about God outside of time there. So I won't go any further than that, but okay. So those are the two ways, if you want to be very general, that people are conceiving of God, and they may not have the language for it, or they may not have thought about it in detail enough. So you might be able to use this diagram to say to somebody, oh, so if we use these circles and this thing, how do you see it? How, is it God within the universe that we're talking about, or is there something out there bigger than the universe that we're talking about? That's a helpful diagram to get people to talk about how they conceive of things, whether you have paper and pencil or you just use words to describe that. And don't be surprised if people go, well, gosh, I don't know. What you've done is given them something to think about that I believe the Lord will use to say, oh, I'm here. I'm bigger than you think, and I give a rip about you. I really believe that God will use that kind of discussion. Okay, is that clear as mud? Does that make sense? You want to ask a question about that? Make a comment.
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm not showing up in green when I talk. Okay. You just kind of like slid right past the idea that God outside of time.
Yeah.
I know, and I think that was intentional.
Yes.
But I was just wondering why that was intentional for you.
Because there's a fairly useful thought that says, understanding of God that says, yes, God in some degree is outside of time. However, God has chosen to intersect time so that he can be a part of our world, and is in some degree self-limiting. God has chosen to limit himself in order to give us free will, and part of that is the time factor.
Okay. Because see, one of the things that always bothers me is that the guy who wrote, A Short History of Time.
Oh yeah, right.
One of the reasons he says that there is no God
Right.
is because he traces all of it back to a point where in his diagram of everything, there comes a point where there would be no time.
Mm-hmm.
And since there can be no time, therefore there can be no God.
Correct.
And, I mean, the book is like 600 pages.
Right.
But
right.
in terms of boiling it down to what he believes, that's his reason for not believing in God.
And I'm sure he was asked this question. I never heard his answer if he was, but the question is, who created the point where everything started? And we go back to Augustine and Aquinas and the unmoved mover and the uncreated creator kind of understanding. It had to come from someplace. And my sense from reading his book is that he liked Eastern religions because they don't need a creator for their religion to work. It always was, and it always will be.
Yeah, because time is infinite to them.
Time is infinite. And
it exists, but it's infinite.
And matter is infinite. It just changes form. It goes from matter to energy to back and forth. And we have quarks and quasars and all that jazz. And so his scientific theory really is influenced by Eastern understanding of religion, God, no, not personal life force, that sort of thing. Because for one to say that God stands outside of time, you have to accept the concept of God as person. And I think people don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I just think it's curious that his whole big, thick book boils down to a single question.
Exactly. And I heard a reading of the Short History of Time. And one of the bottom lines of that book that the summary brought up was Hawkins said, I can tell you how the universe started. I think I can prove to you how the universe started. I cannot tell you why. And I think that's a huge question. However you conceive of religion or how you've experienced it or whatever your reasoning is or how you've gotten to that point, one of the questions that we can ask sincerely and with an open heart and open mind is why? Why is that important? Why does that work? Why are you drawn to that? And for those of us who love the Lord, we know the why. God loves us. That's the why. God created all of this because he loves. That's the essence of who God is. And I know that gets people started on, well, if God loves us, then blah, blah, blah. Why is there evil? Okay. But you've opened the door to the conversation. And that's huge. Okay, good. Other thoughts? So I'm moving into already, how might we use these insights? Any thoughts on your part? How might you use some of these ideas? I realize I've just thrown a big pile of stuff at you. And you may need a little time to kind of absorb and cogitate on that, but anything comes to you at the moment.
But one of the things that comes to me when you were talking is that some of that made me think people were limiting God. And I don't think you can limit God. He's limitless.
Correct. And so if you go back to the previous picture,
Yeah.
this out of the way, if you'll notice, this kind of arc thing has it's not closed.
Right.
That's to represent a God who has no limits, is infinite. I suppose I could have been more scientific and used the infinity symbol, but I didn't, because I want to make sure that we don't limit God, that God is not a closed circle kind of thing.
Right.
And it's this little piece of God that we have encountered in the world, and Christians believe that's ultimately in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? I'm going to fudge myself. I can't remember what my next slide is. Okay, that was it. All right. So how might we use this? Any other ideas that you might have at this point? I'm going to leave the screen sharing on, if that's all right with you, so that if you want to refer back to something, I can make it happen.
I think maybe one of the keys is the way you've presented it is that it's non-confrontational, to help us be more non-confrontational in a discussion.
Right.
I think that's incredibly valuable, because if you're trying to prove to somebody your belief system, that's probably an argument that very rarely would we ever win, even if we like to debate. And the idea of just using questions to find out how or why people feel the way they feel is pretty cool, because when you're asking someone how they feel about it, you're not asking them to prove anything. A feeling isn't scientific or provable. It's how you feel.
Right. You're asking about experience.
I think that's really a huge insight that you've shared with us, because we tend to get more argumentative than we really should.
Yeah. And that's
just our tendency.
Yeah. Good. That's what I wanted you to some of what I wanted you to get out of this, Rick, is that if you were hoping for a class on apologetics, that's not this. And I just kind of cringe when I hear churches mount apologetics classes, because it's like, I'm going to out-argue you. Mm-hmm. Well, you could probably do that. You could out-argue someone. That doesn't mean you've introduced them to Jesus.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't mean that you've even made the door open so they want to know Jesus. All they know is that you can argue with them and make them feel bad, even that they don't know all that stuff. I wasn't won over to Jesus by argument. I haven't met too many people that were. I mean, there are some examples. Lee Strobel, who's written a series of books on the case for Christ, the case for Easter, the case for, I don't know, he's got 3 or 4 of them. Well, that's helpful. Some people do go there. And you'll know that as soon as you start the conversation with people, if that's what they need. They'll ask you those really detailed questions, and they will ask it in such a way as to not embarrass you, but they're looking for an answer because they're interested. But those, I think, my experience has been that those are a far smaller number than we might think. Lots of people want to say, well, I had this happen to me, or I've thought about this, or I've experienced this. and they want to share that and kind of figure out where does that fit, and does this God you're talking about really love me? I will know by how you treat me in this conversation if God really loves me. I think I shared the last time Pastor Devin gave me the opportunity to share with you. I had a student that, I mean, I wish I knew where he was at today, but brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He probably knew way more stuff than I will ever know at half my age, you know. But when I asked him, so have you ever thought about God loving you? Have you ever wondered about how that would work for you? He was just like, oh, I never thought of that. But it took me, I don't know, 7 classes with him to get to the place where I could honestly ask the question and be heard. And I think that's what folks are looking for, is to place a safe place to explore that with people who have had an experience with God, with Jesus, and they can explore that without judgment. So I'm hoping in the next few weeks, you'll begin to get some tools of understanding of where they might be starting from or where they're at. And these are the big ones here, the basic understanding of God in big, broad brush categories. Crickets. I hear crickets. Anything else you want to share? Are you on the 8 o'clock on the dot kind of group?
Ever since John started coming now.
No. Okay. I just, some groups, when it's like 3 minutes till the time, they all just shut down. So I'm trying to read here.
Patty, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I've run across this a couple times, going back to one of the first, actually your first general statement about I'm spiritual but not religious.
Right.
And you said that shows that they are interested in spiritual things, but could that also be used as a cop-out? Don't talk to me about God because I'm spiritual, that's all I need to know. You think they're really interested in a meaningful conversation?
I don't know. I think the only way to know myself is to ask the follow-up question when somebody says that to you is, so what are the spiritual things that you're interested in? If you're not interested in religious things, what are you interested in spiritually? Or when you say that, what do you mean? What's the difference for you? What's the difference between spiritual and religious for you? I think
I'd suggest too that statement, you see that a lot in summaries that you see if people are posting stuff online. It would be like walking into Macy's and having someone say, "Can I help you?" And what is the standard answer? Whether it's Fred Meyer, it doesn't matter where you go. The answer is, "Can I help you?" "No, I'm just looking."
Yeah, that's
It's a defense answer in the religious realm. I'm spiritual but not religious.
Yeah.
It's just like a canned recitation, just a canned answer to try to avoid any sort of confrontation.
Sure. And that could very well be the case. And the only
I'm
way
scared to talk about it. I live in fear that someone might nail me on my belief system.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking.
Yeah. And so if that's the case and they don't want to talk about it, they'll let you know when you say, what do you mean by spiritual? They'll clam up. They'll find
that's a great question.
Yeah. Or you can say, oh, really? I'm interested in spiritual things too. Would you tell me about yours?